Listen, our topics will include but are not limited to everyday issues. We're here for you, for our listeners. We want to know what's important to you. So again, don't miss us on Tan Talk Radio.
That's the Shrinking every Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hey, you new to the area or just want to know about the best hidden gems and upcoming events? Stay tuned. Be Local Buzz with Devin takes you to these places, introduces you to the best businesses, and tells you about upcoming buzz. Preset your radio to Tan Talk 1340 AM or 106.1 FM every Thursday from 4 to 5. That is the Be Local Buzz with Devin on Tan Talk 1340 AM and 106 FM every Thursday from 4 to 5. Looking forward to speaking with you.
Hi, I'm Dawn Reese with the Dawn Reese Show, most powerful names in entertainment, every Thursday at 5 p.m. I have so many different segments I'm so excited to share with you, from miracle stories to celebrity interviews with Hollywood connections to travel to local business, promoting your business on the air with me, an amazing opportunity to grow your business. Tune in to the Tan Talk Radio Network, 106.1 FM on Thursdays, 5 p.m. with me, Dawn Reese.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
You are about to enter the arena of real news and factual commentary on the Voice of Reason here on the Tan.
You know, J.D. Vance voted repeatedly to shut down the federal government. At the time, he was a Republican senator, and there was a Democratic president. In the last Congress, Vance voted against stopgap government spending bills in September and November of 2023 and in January and February of 2024. They were all enacted into law over the objections of his faction of conservative budget hawks. And he did not vote at all on subsequent emergency bills in September and December 2024 when he was on the campaign trail and after he was elected vice president. But even with that record, there was Vance at the White House on Monday following a meeting with President Trump and congressional leaders, creating Democrats for threatening to do exactly what he had voted to do in the past. And here's what he said, quote, our troops and unquote. He also pointed out that it's usually Democrats, including people like Schumer of New York, who insist on keeping the government open while negotiating on points of disagreement. So during the previous funding fight in March, here's what Schumer said, quote, I believe allowing Donald Trump to take even much more power via a government shutdown is a far worse option. I will vote to keep the government open and not shut it down. The role reversal illustrates a Washington idiom. Where you sit is where you stand. Joining me in the Tan Talk studio today, my co-hosts, attorney and former circuit court judge Kevin Carey.
Hello, Ed. How are you doing today?
Kevin, for a textbook example of the idiom I just mentioned, let's go back about a dozen years when in several media appearances between 2011 and 2013, then citizen Donald Trump was asked to explain who held the ultimate responsibility for a federal government shutdown.
First question, Donald, we're having a hell of a time trying to negotiate here in Washington. So tell me, if you were president, what would you do?
Well, very simply, you have to get everybody in a room. You have to be a leader. The president has to lead. I hear the Democrats are going to be blamed and the Republicans are going to be blamed. I actually think the president would be blamed. If there is a shutdown, I think it would be a tremendously negative mark on the president of the United States. He's the one that has to get people together.
They're not going to be talking who the head of the House was, the head of the Senate, who's running things in Washington. So I really think the pressure is on the president.
Are you telling me Trump's a hypocrite?
No, he's told you that himself, didn't he?
Of course he is. It's almost, I think more than not, there are times, and we've done this many, many times, that played out of his own, played the tape out of his own mouth where he's been 180. as has Vance. We've talked, as you just said. And by the way, Vance, you might recall, compared his boss, Trump, to Hitler before he decided he was going to start drinking the Kool-Aid and become part of the cult.
That's supposedly the radical leftist rhetoric now is comparing Trump with Hitler or Mussolini, and yet I've never heard any of the Democrats in Congress do that, but I have heard Vance do it.
That's correct.
You know, it seems like they can't get their facts straight, doesn't it? But you know, the issue now, Kevin, is that now that Vance sits in the White House, this government shutdown presents an opportunity to potentially further slash the whole federal bureaucracy. If I remember right, up to 750,000 federal government employees. That now comes with a risk that if that happens, Republicans will control the presidency, both chambers of the Congress, and the Supreme Court.
Well, yeah, again, keep in mind, Ed, from 30,000 feet, this is all about giving tax cuts to the wealthy buddies of Trump. And that's now happened through the pain of cuts in Medicaid and cutting, this DOGE crazy procedure that they claim were cutting jobs. So, yeah, I think Trump's very happy to keep cutting jobs, and I call that slashing and burning. But as Sheldon Whitehouse said in the Senate this week, they're for example, as you know, the Democrats are pushing hard for, as they should, by the way, I think they have leverage. They're pushing hard for extending these, the Obamacare benefits. And as Sheldon Whitehouse said a couple of days ago on the Senate floor, why do Republicans oppose that? That benefits their constituents in the red states just like it does in the blue states. So at some point, I think they're also going to need to pay a price for that, just like we talked about. I think they'll pay a price next year for the Medicaid cuts and the nursing homes being shut and the hospitals being shut down in these rural areas in red states. So, and I've heard Republicans this week say that the Democrats are playing into their hands because ultimately the Democrats will pay a price for this shutdown. I don't see that happening when, as you mentioned, the entire power structure right now is with Republicans, and reminding Trump that he believes strongly that it's up to the president to make this happen.
And the big distortion that the Republicans are alluding to with this issue that separates them from the Democrats is that the Democrats want the government to spend billions or even trillions of dollars providing health care for illegal aliens, the immigrants that have come into this country illegally. But the fact is, it's a federal law that no money can be used through Medicaid to provide healthcare services for anybody who's here illegally. What the reality of the situation is that there are people in this country who are not citizens who have the right to be here. They've come on a visa or work program or whatever, and they are eligible for Medicaid help, but not anybody who's here illegally. So they keep spreading this lie so that it will gin up opposition to the Democrats. I've also heard them say that the Democrats are trying to import voters. They want an open border so that millions of people will come in from impoverished countries and vote Democratic. It's also illegal for somebody who's not a citizen to vote. So people can't vote just because they show up. And that's how desperate they are to slam the Democrats, is they're making up things that just aren't true.
Well, that's right. Those statements are all false, and they use the immigration issue for their purposes. Again, their primary purpose is tax cuts for the rich, and they've been able to do that in a very painful way, but they keep blaming immigration. Just as you said, Ed, there are many people in this country who aren't citizens, but that doesn't make them illegal. Mm-hmm. And that's this gray area that they Republicans, by confusing people and having them be ignorant of what the law is. There are many, many people here on green cards. They're seeking asylum, paying taxes, by the way. They're employed, and their pay cuts include taxes being taken out. They're paying sales taxes. So again, they use immigration as a tar baby for whatever they want to use it for to meet their objective at that moment.
Issue number 2. Turns out it was the right decision to rename it the War Department. I'll ask you to weigh in just a few moments on this, Kevin, but here's why. Rather than employ the concept of a strong military to prevent war, Trump has made it abundantly clear that he has every intention of using the U.S. military to destroy any opposition to him or his oppressive, radical, right-wing agenda. At his address to all the active military generals from all branches of the military assembled Tuesday in Quantico, Virginia, Trump offered his nearly certain intention to use the military to persecute anyone who speaks out against him or his agenda as the midterm elections approach next year.
Well, America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But we are under invasion from within. I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military.
You know, when I was driving over here this morning, Ed, I was thinking about what I wanted to say. My father would have been 95 yesterday. He was a 2-star general, West Point graduate, fighter pilot, Vietnam veteran. And I see what Trump has done to the military, and it's just sickening to me at all these levels. First, he's ranting. He's giving a campaign speech in front of these military generals yesterday. I've grown up and lived my life around generals. That's not what they focus on. It's not about politics. And our Constitution separates those two concepts. And he's ranting as if this is a campaign rally. And he even, if you saw his speech, he was encouraging applause. I don't know if you saw that. Mm-hmm. Just completely, not just inappropriate, but illegal for him to be doing that. And it put the generals in a very tough position. By the way, it also put our security at risk to have all the generals coming in worldwide, which has never happened before for good reason, as well as the expense. But Trump just wants an audience to kiss his tail, and he was bothered by the fact that they would not do that. And he went on and on about this concept of using the military for local civil purposes, which is, again, completely illegal. And if they're directed to do that, for example, a general would, under his or her obligation, could not fire on American citizens, which is basically what Trump apparently wants another Kent State where they can just shoot away at any protesters.
Exactly right. Now listen to Trump describe the action he's already taken to implement military force against the American people who, for any reason, protest his policies or crimes.
Last month, I signed an executive order to provide training for quick reaction force that can help quell civil disturbances. And this is going to be a big thing for the people in this room because it's the enemy from within, and we have to handle it before it gets out of control.
The enemy within. Mm-hmm. The difference between Trump and Watergate and Nixon is he's right out front. He does it in your face. He doesn't hide behind, as Nixon's crowd did. It took a little while to ferret that out. With Trump and his minions, they just tell you what they're doing with the assumption that nobody's going to care. But again, objectively, what he did was illegal. The comments made, this became a campaign rally. He was bad-mouthing Biden. Again, I've spent my whole life around military people. Who the president is should not be affecting day-to-day decisions these generals are making. But it was almost somewhat, I thought, intimidating too. He was trying to threaten these generals, saying if they didn't follow his course, there'd be repercussions.
Well, he's essentially saying he's intolerant of anybody who holds a political opinion that's in contradiction to what he thinks. He basically wants to be a king. He's even now resorted to cutting funding for federal projects in blue states all around the country, saying if your state didn't vote for me, you don't get any federal funding anymore. We'll just stop projects that are in the progress of being constructed right now. You can send money to the federal government. We'll give it to the red states and support them because they need it, because they all need help. But
Well,
you don't get any of it
if
back.
you have
I
a
mean,
Democrat, he's already said he hates Democrats. He said that many times.
They're coming right out portraying Democrats as the communist party that wants to destroy the country.
So if you're in a blue state, or even if you're in a red state like Georgia is somewhat red, but they're two Democratic U.S. senators, he's told you as a citizen that he hates your senators or representatives. So why would he do anything to be helpful? He divides this country more than any other president, in our lifetime, or I think the history of this nation. And by the way, I wanted to mention something about these workers being fired, which has happened already under Doge and is going to happen some more. The other part of that's horrible is that he's also limiting what's called the Merit Systems Protection Board, which is an independent quasi-judicial agency that addresses appeals filed by fired federal workers. Like any employee, there's a whole body of law, labor law. So first he's going, I've got the right to fire you for no reason, and I'm also going to cut off any appeals right, because this quasi-judicial panel in the case that came up recently found that these two employees were not fired properly. So they're coming in saying, well, you don't, again, this dictatorial authoritarian approach. What I say, as you said, King goes, we're not going to allow you to go to these quasi-judicial bodies and seek a remedy for improper firing. It's all about the king.
Mm-hmm. He demonstrated his intolerance for anybody that doesn't subscribe to his concept of what the military should be. Now, remember, Donald Trump received 5 draft deferments, 4 for college, 1 for non-existent bone spurs. And he told this room full of career officers this, quote, if you don't like what you hear, you can walk out. Of course, there goes your rank. There goes your future. He spent 70 minutes speaking slowly, slurring words, and delivering sort of an incoherent stream of words that jumped from what appeared to be prepared remarks to his own improvisation. He covered the Gulf of America, his claims to have stopped 7 or 8 wars and saved millions of lives, and so on.
What's ironic that Trump was saying that he wants there to be a weight, you have to be a certain weight in great shape physically, maybe run 5 miles when he could do none of those things. He's very, very overweight, despite these phony annual physicals that say he's in great shape and lie about his weight. But I want to make another point about this, which I haven't heard much about, but I read about in the paper this morning, Ed. He made a point too, that, and so did Hegseth, that the military is not the area for social change. And he was taking a shot at the LGBTQ. He made a comment about that should offend any woman, which they do on an hourly basis, that the military will be run by a male orientation toward women. As you may know, that there was women being into combat did not happen until several years ago. But my point I'm trying to make, Ed, is social change, contrary to what he said, is very much a part of the military. The military was ahead of our society in terms of diversifying in race and with women. So to say that the military should not be involved in social change is just completely ignorant of our history.
He wants to take us back to the pre-World War II era, where people who were minorities served as mess hall attendants and laborers and the laundry attendants in the military, instead of actually being actual military combatants. And so that it sort of began with, I suppose, the Tuskegee Airmen, and Harry Truman, I think, came along and said, we're going to stop this all through the federal government. We're going to start hiring on basis of merit instead of just white privilege.
Again, like immigration, they have these themes that they throw out there, which get stale. One of the themes is about this, this LGBTQ and woke. Again, there were women generals in that room who had excellent careers. There were women who were fighter pilots, like my father. Mm-hmm. So he didn't understand that. Of course, like you said, he lied about avoiding the military. The thought of Trump being anywhere near the military to me is a joke, that he would even have any ability as commander-in-chief to address any military issues.
And he can't get over his contempt for former President Biden, during the speech, he attacked him 11 times, calling him the auto pen and claiming his administration was really run by radical left lunatics. Quote, "We were not respected with Biden," unquote, is what Trump said. Well, actually, we were. When Biden came in, we regained the respect of our allies and the cooperation of them. But then he offered this.
Since my inauguration, we're witnessing the triumphant return of peace through strength. We have great peace through strength. America is respected again as a country. We were not respected with Biden. They looked at him falling downstairs every day. Every day, the guy's falling downstairs. He said, "It's not our president. We can't have it." I'm very careful, when I walk downstairs like I'm on stairs, like these stairs. I walk very slowly. Nobody has to set a record. Just try not to fall, because it doesn't work out well. A few of our presidents have fallen, and it became a part of their legacy. We don't want that. You walk nice and easy. You don't have to set any record. Be cool. Be cool when you walk down, but don't pop down the stairs. So one thing with Obama, I had zero respect for him as a president, but he would bop down those stairs. I've never said, da-da-da-da-da-da, pop, pop, pop. He'd go down the stairs, wouldn't hold on. I said, "It's great. I don't want to do it. I guess I could do it, but eventually bad things are going to happen, and it only takes once." But he did a lousy job as president. A year ago, we were a dead country. We were dead. This country was going to hell. We were dead in every way, from immigration to military. We didn't have the weapons. We were given everything to Ukraine. We had nothing.
Do Republicans think this is okay? To hear this guy rambling like he's on somebody's, the front porch having a few beers. I mean, the one thing I do like about him, he doesn't drink, but the only thing I like about him.
Yeah, but now I do.
Well, he's causing other
the
people
dry
to drink.
July. Jesus.
Well, how can anyone justify that? It makes no sense. He goes off his teleprompter. In fact, when he's going off the teleprompter when he can't put two sentences together, and he starts rambling like he's had a few drinks. And the thought that he keeps criticizing Democrat presidents, Biden, Obama, in front of this group of generals, keep in mind, again, this is no campaign rally. And so he wanted this, and again, he can't read the room very well. And he all he knows are these campaign rallies where he gets up there and starts, railing away. And so he tried to do that with this room, and it just doesn't work. I would love to be a mind reader for those generals in that room.
Yeah. Now, he says we were a dead country. When Biden was president, we had the strongest economy in the world. Our economy, our GDP was double Western Europe. And the inflation that started under the Trump administration with the COVID shortages was steadily brought down through the Biden administration. And we never went into the recession that the Republicans were anxiously predicting and hoping we'd go into, because the Fed chair kept the interest rates at the right level to prevent it. So we were hardly a dead country.
Trump is in a fantasy world.
Of course he is.
And I don't know why these enablers, they're all enablers like an addict. They enable this man who has no sense of reality. He's going to get reality next fall, though, Ed, with these midterms. It's going to be a very good day for Democrats, and they're going to look these congressmen and women that have lost their jobs because of Trump, which will happen next November, can look at Trump and say, "What happened?" So it won't be quite as nice a day for him then. But I would expect my Republican friends to say, at least have a president dealing in reality, which he doesn't deal in reality.
Well, see, I think he sees it coming, to be honest with you. He can see what his poll numbers are doing, and we're going to review them after our break. He's upside down on everything. He's losing popularity very quickly. He's almost getting down to the level of the Democratic Party. But I think that may have a lot to do with why his speech seemed to announce a new mission for the military. He claimed the U.S. has domestic enemies, which he called insurrectionists, paid by the radical left, and said that cities that are run by the radical left Democrats, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. And this is going to be a major part for some of the people in this room. That's a war too. It's a war from within. I'm quoting Trump now, and I'm continuing to. He says he told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a city with an incompetent governor, stupid governor. Trump told the audience that our inner cities are a big part of war now. Forget the Posse Comitatus Act that generally prohibits the federal military from being used for domestic law enforcement. He's going to use the military to try to intimidate voters in Democratic districts in the midterms so that he can retain power. And I don't know this for a fact, but this is what I see when I put all the pieces of this puzzle together.
Well, you have people that agree with you. The governor of Illinois agrees with you. Given what's happened, and it gets worse week by week, it's not an insane thing to think about. But we're going to talk more about Epstein in a minute, about this discharge petition. He's got very serious problems there as well, politically. Mm-hmm. And so do the Republicans are going to be forced to vote on whether or not they find pedophilia to be okay. They're trying to avoid this vote like the plague. So when we get to Epstein, we'll talk more about that.
Quickly before our break, issue number 3 is that a federal judge on Tuesday heavily criticized the Trump administration's crackdown on free speech as he ruled in favor of foreign students the government has targeted for their support of Palestinian rights. This is a Massachusetts-based U.S. district judge. His name is William Young, President Ronald Reagan appointee, and he ruled that foreign students enjoy the same free speech protections under the Constitution's First Amendment as American citizens. He found that government officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Homeland Security Secretary Barbie Noem, quote, deliberately and with purposeful forethought, did so concert their actions and those of their 2 departments intentionally to chill the rights to freedom of speech and peacefully to assemble, unquote. He cited Trump's orders that targeted law firms, universities, and the media, which have fared badly in court, as examples. And this is what he wrote, Kevin, quote, the Constitution, our civil laws, regulations, mores, customs, practices, courtesies, all of it. The president simply ignores it all when he takes it into his head to act. And he added, the president's palpable misunderstanding that the government simply cannot seek retribution for speech he disdains poses a great threat to America's freedom of speech, unquote.
Can I back up for a second about before we move on from the military? Washington Post had a very good article this week saying that military leaders have raised serious concerns about the Trump administration's forthcoming defense strategy, exposing a great divide between the Pentagon's political and uniformed leadership. So we haven't talked a lot about that. We've talked about what a horrible presentation Hegseth and Trump made, in an illegal presentation they made before the generals. But we really haven't talked about the fact, Ed, there is a serious divide between the military leadership and this administration. Again, Trump thinks he can do whatever he wants because he's king. But specifically, again, we don't get many specifics from Trump. We never do. We get the tired playbook. But to be specific, the critique from multiple top officers, including General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So, for our listeners, each military branch has a chief of staff, and the Air Force, Army, Marines, and Navy, and then there's a chairman of the Joint Chiefs who's Dan Kane. He's very concerned about the perceived threats to the homeland, narrowing U.S. competition with China, and downplaying America's role in Europe and Africa, which is what's happening. One of the things that's happening is as Trump is focusing on illegally using the military internally against U.S. citizens, he's ignoring the issue internationally. And so that's a problem. And so there's a big, this is not a minor issue right now over this debate over the national defense strategy. And the Pentagon's primary guide for how it prioritizes resources and positions U.S. forces around the world there's a big divide right now between Trump and Hegseth and the actual people that know how to run the military. And Hegseth doesn't know how to run the military.
Of course not.
He was in the military for about 10 minutes when he wasn't, beating his wife or, getting drunk and getting a DUI.
Every single person sitting in that room looking back at him, every single one without exception was more qualified for his job than he is.
Oh, there's no question
and
about
he has
that.
the audacity to lecture them.
Well, yeah, I think.
Effing jerk.
Well, I there's going to be a challenge here. Just we've talked about the issues with the judges as well. Supreme Court, how far will they go down the road in this cult-like approach? But when the military, that again owes its allegiance to the Constitution, let's remind our listeners of that. When you take an oath of office, you don't take an oath of office to kiss Trump's ass. You take an oath of office to follow the Constitution. Now, Trump has taken that oath and completely ignores it, but these military officers have not. And keep in mind, with military, you're talking about people dying. It's not just about politics or money. It's about people dying, and the generals don't appreciate being told how to run their operation when they've been in the various forces for 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's time for a brief time out here on The Voice of Reason. When we come back, we'll ask the question, has Trump done anything right in his administration? There may be some disagreement on that, but we'll find out. You're listening to The Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network. I'm Ed Golly. Stay with me and my co-host, attorney and former Judge Kevin Carey. We'll be right back with more of the issues that conservatives never want you to hear about.
Are you a writer, inventor? Do you have questions about your intellectual property rights? Well, tune in every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 11 o'clock for Joy on Paper. Once a month, I will have a special guest, the writer's legal eagle, Bill Larson of Larson & Larson, who can answer your questions. Protect your valuable work. Email me your questions to patsy.radio@gmail.com and then listen in every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. right here on Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network. That's patsy.radio@gmail.com.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Hi there, I'm Robin Savage, stand-up comic. Are you sick of the news getting pushed around by two sides, always saying the other side is wrong? You deserve to enjoy the news.
That's what's up, Robin. I'm your host, Mac James, from Stand Up for News. We're stand-up comics, and we tell the news. The news doesn't have any legs and can't stand up for its own self. Join us and special guests like local hero comics like Donnie Stopa, all the way to legends like Tommy Chong, here on WTAN Radio.
Every Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m.
And now it's time for the Only a Conservative Could Think It Minute with your host, Ed Golly.
I'm not sure we've ever seen an opportunity as rich and robust as opposing Trump's terrible tariffs. They are raising prices on people. They are widely unpopular. They are an extraordinary betrayal of Trump's central promise of his campaign. They're a modern tax, illegal and unconstitutional, and an extraordinary abuse of presidential power. They are alienating countries and consumers around the world and accelerating our decline as a global superpower. Tariffs are hurting farmers and small businesses. They are shifting the tax burden in America from the wealthy to all the rest of us. They are an oligarch's dream and a working person's nightmare. Only a conservative could think we should not be fighting them with everything we've got. Think about that.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
Well, Cable Network News chief data analyst Harry Enton produced a report on the eve of the special election for the Arizona 7th District, won by the Democratic candidate, Grijalva, with 87% of the estimated vote having been cast. He expands the report to describe how Democratic candidates are winning elections by substantial margins and what that could ultimately forecast for the 2026 midterm elections.
What a massive move to the left, to the Democratic side we're talking about here. My goodness gracious. All right, we look at the 7th District. Kamala Harris won it by 22 points. Look at Grijalva's margin at this particular point with 87% of the estimated vote in. Look at that, 39 points. That is a 17-point overperformance. And of course, this goes with what we were talking about last week, which is Democrats doing much better than they were doing in Latino districts. A lot of Latinos live in Arizona's 7th district, and not surprisingly, Grijalva doing 17 points better than Kamala Harris did back just a little less than a year ago.
Does this fit a pattern of what you have been seeing this year?
Look at the average 2025 special House election so far. Democrats are doing, on average, get this, 18 points better than Kamala Harris did back in 2024. So the 17-point overperformance last night matches the average that we see, the 18-point overperformance that Democrats have had in U.S. House elections. Again, this is one of the best signs that Democrats have had so far. When people vote, Democrats are doing significantly better than they did just a little bit less than a year ago.
Can you look at this and sort of extrapolate what might happen in 2026? I mean, vaguely.
Yeah, okay. There's a reason why we're doing this segment. It's because this could potentially really matter. What are we talking about here? Okay, special elections and midterm results. If a party outperforms in special elections going all the way back since the 05-06 cycle, they go on to win the U.S. House of Representatives 5 out of 5 times. We'll see if it becomes 6 out of 6. But the bottom line is history says that the Democrats outperforming just like they did last night in Arizona's 7th district. The presidential baseline is a very, very good sign as these districts move very much to the left.
And let me first say that this gentleman is not some liberal pundit. I remember on CNN last year, he was making the point on and on that Harris was in trouble. Even when early on, I think a lot of us felt that Harris was doing much better than she would do. So he's not, this isn't, some MSNBC liberal pundit. But he's making the point we've made several times, and it's not so much about winning and losing, it's about overperforming. And that's the point he's making, that those are huge numbers ahead of what Harris did. And I mentioned a few weeks ago, even in Florida, where the Democrat lost 2 special elections due to the folks moving on to the cabinet with Trump, the Democrats did much, much better than was expected. And that's what we need to focus on. It's not so much winning and losing, but how, and this is what I think scares Republicans to death, is we're out overperforming in these areas like that district. There was never a question when it was the daughter of the father who was going to win that race, but the number was staggering that it was so much higher than what Harris did in 2024.
I heard that Congressional Representative Anna Luna wants to put a statue of Charlie Kirk in Congress, who, let's face it, 10 years from now, nobody's going to know who the guy ever was, but it's because the conservatives are asserting that he has brought this groundswell of support from the younger voters, 18 to 29, into the conservative movement. But let's look at what's actually happening, Kevin. In Trump's first week of his second term, among voters 18 to 29 years of age, he had a 48% approval rating and only a 43% disapproval rating. So he was up by 5 points. On September 30th, that had dropped to half. Only 24% approve, 64% disapprove. That's a 45-point drop, and he's 40 points underwater with that group. Kirk wasn't doing the job they want us to believe he was.
Well, the problem with that, too, is that the young people who can't buy a house and inflation's killing them and they can't get health insurance, that's what they're focused on.
You're darn tootin'. It's hard to get jobs now, good paying jobs. And it's not limited to that demographic. One of the most astonishing is the Black demographic, which the Republicans claim they're courting successfully. 29% of Black voters approved of the job Trump was doing his first week in office. Now, at the end of last month, just a few days ago, it has dropped to only 12%. That's a 43-point drop, and they have an 86% disapproval rating of Trump. He is 74 points underwater with Black voters and not doing any better with Hispanic and Latino voters. 42% first week, now down to 33% approval. 22 points underwater. And 2 other categories I want to mention were 2 of Trump's signature campaign issues, which were inflation and immigration. Where in immigration, he was actually getting a 51% approval rating first week in office. It's now down to 44% with 51% disapproving. And on inflation, it's gone from 45 to 32% with 60% disapproval rating. And that's because he may stand out and say there is no inflation. The problem is the voters go out to buy a car or to go out and buy groceries or to go out and borrow money to buy a house, and they realize, yes, there is inflation. We haven't tamed it. It's averaging about 3% now and slated to go up as the tariffs kick in.
Well, I'm convinced that Biden lost or Harris lost because of inflation, and now that's on Trump. It's on his nickel, and he keeps, we say this every week. He keeps whining that this is still Biden's problem, even though we're deep into his first year. But I want to go back to one of the first things you said a minute ago, Ed, was that about this statue for Charlie Kirk.
Yeah,
Charlie Kirk says some very racist, misogynist things. He's no Martin Luther King. He's no Abraham Lincoln. He was he was a successful conservative spokesperson, and he did bring in many people into that under that tent. And again, it's horrible that he was killed. I'm not even sure assassinated is the right word. He was not a high. I'm not sure that's the right word. I don't think assassination is the right word. But he was killed. And that was horrible. But he said many things that are offensive to anyone other than white males in this country. So that should not merit a statue in Washington.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. If Anna Luna subscribed to his ideology, she wouldn't be a congresswoman. She would be a husband-obeying baby factory. That's what she'd be doing.
Well, you heard Kirk last week say that Taylor Swift should
abandon her career
and obey her husband and take his name.
What a bunch of! I mean, that's a message of Christian oppression. And that's exactly the opposite of what our Constitution has come to represent in this country, where we allow every person, regardless of sex or race or sexual preference, whether they're gay or LGBTQ, to reach out for their full potential. And now we've got these idiots like Hegseth saying, no, you're not going to do that in the military. It's for white males only. They're the only people that will get the advancement and so on. It's going to be a white privileged military.
Yeah, these are all reflecting spokespeople talking about what a minority of this country believe, Ed. That's not what the majority of this country believes. None of those positions are.
I think you're right. Down deep, I think you're right. And that's why I wonder why they think they're drawing so many people into that sphere when it's that are the poor people that don't have a job or low paying jobs. Their interests are not being protected at all by this administration, and they're going to. And so Trump and the Republicans will pay a price in the ballot box next year, just like we paid a price last year for the inflation. Mm-hmm. Now, earlier we alluded to what happened last month in the congressional seat in Arizona. Adelita Grijalva was elected to fill her father's open congressional seat, leaving the House now 219 Republicans to 214 Democrats, which gives the Democrats enough votes to pass what's called a discharge position that would put the House on record calling for the release of all the Epstein files. Well, this is a 4-alarm fire drill for Speaker Johnson, who is doing everything in his power to avert truth and justice and the American way in Congress. Right? He's doing everything he can to prevent these Epstein files from being released.
Well, what he's doing is not just. I mean, it's corrupt, and I've used that term many times. I don't use it though, unless I feel like it applies. They know that magic number with the 4 Republicans, Ed, would get to the 218, which is a magical number for a petition, a discharge petition. And so he's delaying. He being Mike Johnson, the Speaker, is delaying swearing in this recent person who, she just took the slot. She just won the election we just talked about, that her father, when he passed away. But before you go to the audio on that, so when the Republican wins, he swears them in 15. And you can. It is a procedure that's very, very rarely used, where when an issue will not come out of the committee, and a majority of the House wants it to come out. And the issue here is release of the Epstein file. I mean, this is a big deal.
It is.
And when you get to that number, which Trump is fighting against, so for Johnson to say, I'm not going to swear you in now, it just shows what a puppet he is.
So let's offer up an explanation now of how Johnson is frantically attempting to prevent the files from being released, and how can the House now get past his efforts?
Republican Speaker Mike Johnson has, of course, been working around the clock for many months now to prevent the release of any and all files related to Jeffrey Epstein, because Trump doesn't want any of that released for fairly obvious reasons. But Mike Johnson no longer has the numbers to keep those Epstein files hidden any longer. Thanks to a recent slew of Democratic victories in special elections, the Democrats now have the numbers. And of course, several Republican defectors, who include, by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and Nancy Mace, they now have the votes, and they can force the release of these Epstein files. So here is why this matters. Obviously, earlier in this month, the Democrats and the Republican defectors tried to force a vote on a discharge petition because Mike Johnson refuses to bring the legislation to the floor. So in order to force it on the floor by bypassing Johnson and the House rules, you file a discharge petition. If a majority of people vote in favor of that, then the regular legislation, which is to release the full Epstein files, would come to a floor vote. Democrats didn't have the numbers. And in the beginning of September, they knew that. And they thought, okay, well, we've got special elections coming up. We're favored in those elections. So if we win those two, which they did, we'll have the numbers. Boom, we can make it happen. But it doesn't mean we're going to get it immediately. Okay, don't expect this to come out next Monday. Here's what happens. Once the discharge petition is in fact brought to the floor and it is voted upon and it passes, then you have to wait 7 days before you can bring the legislation that the discharge petition was forcing.
So that may be Republicans have it. Not only do they don't want the release of the Epstein files, they do not want a record of having to vote on the release of the Epstein files. Right. And that's what they're scared to death of, because there's now going to be a vote in the House on it. And they do have the numbers. Thank goodness. There are 4 Republicans who are getting us to the magical number of 218. And then it goes to the Senate. So they're scared to death of having to vote in favor of pedophilia, which is what this is all about. The biggest problem, we've said this again and again about the Epstein case with Trump, for Trump, is it's a black and white issue which people understand. You know, we've got victims that I wish every Friday morning we're having press conferences. But the biggest part of this, beyond getting release of the Epstein files, and it's more than just a list, by the way. They're many videotapes. Epstein videotapes all these in his rooms because he wanted to blackmail these people. He had a method to all this. He was a dark individual. But now voting and saying, okay, are we going to allow these files to be released and the public to see? I want to see some tap dancing from these Republicans, because the House members, and if they're all, by the way, even at 218, that assumes every other House member beyond the 4 Republicans are going to vote against it. Mm-hmm. So they're going to have to vote on the record against it. This is assuming that all but 4 of those Republicans are going to vote against it.
Yeah. So this could be the month that is. The adage is that even a blind dog can find a bone. Well, of course, because dogs don't find bones by looking around with their eyes. They detect the scent of the bone, and that's what leads them to it. But can we apply that adage to a president who is a convicted felon, a tax cheat, a con man, and the most corrupt president in history? Could he actually have done anything right so far, in view of the fact that we have a slight tendency on this program to suggest that maybe there's some things that he isn't exactly doing right? And I think there may be some things that he's he's done, and at least consistent with some of his campaign promises. We've reviewed earlier some that he ignored, but he did campaign on sealing the border. Biden said, oh, this is an issue that Congress needs to address. Trump said, no, all we need is a new president. And sure enough, when he came into office, the flow of immigrants across the border stopped dramatically. So I would give him a yes for having sealed the border.
Can I respond to that?
Go ahead.
I'll give him a no, a strong no. You can't do it in a legal fashion. I could do it by having a machine gun everyone that comes across the aisle. But let me finish. He's put these hostages in gulags in El Salvador and Cuba and in Africa without hearings, without lawyers. As we said last week, the Miami Herald has found that 60% of those people in the Alligator Alcatraz in South Florida are just missing. They can't be found, on top of them blowing up these Venezuelan fishing boats, which is, again, illegal. So I'm not going to give anyone credit. It's not about Trump. People say to me, you don't like him. I don't like him, but that's not the point. You can't do anything in an illegal fashion. So for him to say, I've shut off the border, it's like saying, well, if I'm going to electrocute anyone that comes across the border, yeah, you can shut it off, but you've got to do it in a way that's consistent with the Constitution.
He has compelled Western Europe to pony up more money for their defense. He started out by threatening to pull the United States out of NATO altogether, and then asserted that the United States was disproportionately contributing to it. And sure enough, they have agreed to come up to more like 2% of their GDP per nation for their defense.
Well, I would say that's outweighed, though, by his actions, which have certainly put NATO in peril. I mean, he's always had this theme of, we're a bunch of schmucks and other countries aren't paying enough. But he's done nothing to shore up NATO. In fact, he's done just the opposite.
Well, what about the efforts he has made to procure peace deals around the world, whether he's succeeded to the extent that he boasts that he has or not? He has made the effort. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I wouldn't agree with that either. Where's he made the effort?
Over in Israel, didn't they come up with the 20-point plan for peace?
That hasn't happened. I think he's on the wrong side of that history with the president of the prime minister of Israel right now. The Gaza Strip is a killing field right now, and we're letting that happen and not raising our concerns about it. You saw what happened when the prime minister of Israel spoke at the United Nations. Most of that room walked out. I'm a firm supporter of Israel, but it doesn't mean everything they do is legal or appropriate. And he continues to kiss Putin's ass on Ukraine. Now he's coming out now and saying he fully supports Ukraine and they should get back even more land than what they initially had. So he's kind of schizophrenic in his foreign policy. But I firmly believe Putin that he'll do nothing ultimately that Putin would not agree to.
All right. How about this? He has eliminated the minting of the penny, because it costs more to produce them than they're worth.
I'll give him credit for that. I'll give you one check that we're going to, I guess, not have any more pennies. I'm not sure that was an important issue in the campaign.
No, you're right. It wasn't a campaign. Neither was eliminating paper Social Security checks, which he's preparing to do. They assert that this will help eliminate waste and fraud. But it's just a sign of the times, Kevin. This is the way things are moving. It's going to be either direct deposit or deposited to a debit card that the recipient has. And he's talking about eliminating required quarterly business reports to only biannual reports, which he claims will save some money for reporting and have some implications of preventing companies from buying back their own stock to try to boost their stock prices and so on. So
I'm not in favor of that, limiting the number of disclosures. Okay. I'm not a fan of that either.
All right. So you say he's 0 for 6.
No, I gave him the penny.
It's time for our quote from the day, and this is from a fellow named Jamie Barnett, who was a rear admiral in the U.S. Navy. He's retired. But listen to what he said. Quote, "In America, the military does not enforce our domestic laws. America does not use the military to suppress peaceful protests, even if we disagree with the protests. We have always known that tyrants use the military against their own people." Unquote. Stay with us for national and international news now from CBS, and we'll be back again next Thursday with another edition of The Voice of Reason. I'm Ed Golly reminding you, if a statement seems a little bit too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because a conservative said it.
Make them prove it.
WTAN Clearwater,
FM 106.1,
WDCF Dade City,
FM 102.3.
Listen